Before Stephen Hawking died, he made a moving final gesture. In March 2018, the world-famous English physicist Professor Stephen Hawking passed away. A popular and celebrated scientist, Hawking was destined to be greatly missed. But in one corner of the United Kingdom, a touching final act would leave people stunned by his generosity. And it was to come on the day of his funeral itself. When doctors told Hawking, age 22, that he had an uncommon variety of motor neuron disease, the course of his life could never have been imagined. After all, the physicians said he'd likely only survive for a handful of years. However, he went on to write his name in history. Indeed, a half-century later, Hawking might well have been the world's best-known scientist. Even though he spent many of those years in a wheelchair, close to full paralysis, and only able to speak through an electronic synthesizer, he produced works in physics that left people astonished. In fact, respected experts were willing to compare him to luminaries such as Sir Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. So closely connected to motor neuron disease was Hawking that, after he had passed, a horde of people visited the website of the UK charity for the disorder. In fact, so many people visited it that it crashed. You see, Hawking had been a patron of the charity for 10 years. Nevertheless, by the time Hawking got to college at Oxford University, he had begun to excel at physics. So much so that he could coast, working for what he figured later had been only an hour a day. He said, "I'm not proud of this lack of work, I'm just describing my attitude at the time," which I shared with most of my fellow students. That work was enough to earn the youngster a first-class degree from Oxford, but he went on to Cambridge University for his doctorate. But he had already started to feel the effects of the illness that would define his life. Whereas he had been a keen horseman and rower, he would later find that he could hardly move his body at all. And Hawking's romance with Jane formed a central part of a film that was made about him in 2014. Yes, in The Theory of Everything, Eddie Redmayne portrayed the physicist on his way to success in both his career and love life. And so well did Redmayne recreate the scientific legend that he scooped an Oscar for his work. However, because Hawking's radiation remained theoretical and couldn't be proven, the great scientist never received a Nobel Prize. It's one of the few honors that escaped him, as he was bestowed with endless awards, medals, and honors. But it's said that at one point he refused a knighthood because of concerns over science funding from the government. By the 1980s, Hawking and collaborator Jim Hartle came up with a view of the universe as having no spatial or temporal boundaries. This formed the basis of his 1988 book, A Brief History of Time, and the book became a bestseller, shifting in excess of 25 million copies globally. Although the writer himself doubted that all those people actually read it. Meanwhile, his academic career continued to thrive. For 30 years, he held the post of Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge University. This job had once belonged to Sir Isaac Newton. And after 2009, he took charge of research at the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics at Cambridge too. That's because as the coffin entered the University Church of St. Mary the Great, the 6 people who were carrying the scientist's remains were met with applause. These pallbearers were the porters of Gonville and Caius College at Cambridge University that had been Hawking's academic home for half a century. Meanwhile, celebrities, including astrophysicist, musician, and Queen member Brad May, had flocked to the great man's funeral. And Eddie Redmayne, who once portrayed Hawking on film, read from the Bible. To add to that, Martin Rees, a prominent astronomer, also gave a reading while Hawking's eldest, Robert, did the eulogy. But back on the day of Hawking's funeral, it became clear that the professor had made a gift as his final act. And at the Wesley Methodist Church, not too far from where people were saying goodbye to the physicist, a charity concerned with the homeless was putting his last wishes into action. And the homeless and hungry who enjoyed the meal paid their own tribute to the scientist before they started eating. Collis, a member of the Food Cycle organization, told English newspaper The Daily Mail about the moment. Yes, she said that those present had a little cheer in honor of Stephen Hawking before tucking in. Indeed, for 8 years before Hawking's funeral, volunteer cooks had gotten together to serve meals at the church. And Food Cycle put on a dinner at the site, right in the middle of Cambridge, every Saturday. Touchingly, not just the homeless are welcome to eat, but also those who live in isolation. Food Cycle told website dailymail.co.uk that Hawking's daughter Lucy had reached out to them the week before to offer support. Collis said, "They wanted to do something to support people going through a tough time, It was a really lovely gesture and very kind of them to think of Food Cycle. And the foundation was a beneficiary of another generous gift that the physician had left. That's right, a Hawking wheelchair went to auction with the expectation that it would fetch perhaps around $20,000. But it was actually sold for a considerably bigger figure, closer to $400,000. Then his foundation, in another act of goodwill, shared this windfall with the Motor Neuron Disease Association. So it's fair to say that doctors who told Hawking he would not live past his 20s were proved wrong. And Hawking himself explained that the disease had not prevented him from having a family that he adored and work that brought him to acclaim. Indeed, Hawking said, "It shows that one need not lose hope." The world is filled with stories going viral every single day. But how many of these sites can you actually follow? We understand that your day should start with positive stories, stories that resonate with you. And so we started JoJo Stories. Our mission is to create meaningful stories that cover everything from animals to anthropology, history to environment and lifestyle. The kind of content you read on our site will be one you'll want to share with your family and friends. We hope you'll join our growing family and be part of our community. Welcome to JoJo Stories. JoJoStories.com.